everyone, and welcome to Between Two Coaches. We're on a mission to make fitness more human. The Snark will be sold separately this evening. I am joined, as always, by my co-host,
Coach Nick. Thanks everyone for joining us so much. We have a great episode today. We have on a very special guest, the former NFL sports scientist who's brought his love of research and science to the running world, and we're all thankful for that. And I'm talking about none other than Jonah Rosner. Welcome, Jonah.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm such a big fan of the podcast.
Yeah, thanks. So today, this episode, we're talking about a really fun topic. We're going to talk about the difference between exercise science and what we learn versus how we apply as coaches. And we'll dive into all that and what we mean. But first, Jonah, why don't you take a little bit to tell everyone about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. It's not that exciting, unfortunately, but yeah, kind of as you mentioned, sports scientist by trade. So just recently finished up a 10-year career as a sports scientist, strength coach, performance coach, all that good stuff. Where I worked across most professional sports in America, most recently in the NFL. So essentially, my main job was to understand how we take the latest technology and testing, whether it's biomechanical or metabolic in nature, to understand the individual athlete in front of you, and then give them individualized or specific training interventions based on that testing, and then monitor their training over time based on other data were collected, that initial testing, just to make sure they're getting better or potentially getting worse, and also try to keep them healthy based on some of the stuff we're seeing. So long story short, I specialize in using technology to prescribe training and monitor that training over time with hopefully some exercise science behind it. But sure, as we'll get into, science is always a little murky.
Definitely is, but it is cool.
that is what Nick and I were talking about right offline, is you have such a unique and approachable way of taking science and research, making it digestible to general population, also coaches. But I think we'll talk a little bit about how that could be,
I
for lack of
appreciate
better phrase, yeah,
Yeah.
not misconstrued, but maybe carried in a way that needs improvement.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I think something you and I can agree on is, I think now if you just look at like the word, as I've been exposed more to more the online platform of exercise physiology and social media, it's very much extremism. Um,
Yeah.
and people want to go, oh, this is the best diet. This is the only way you're going to get better. It's either this or that. And I think when I was younger, naive, I definitely thought there was all these answers in exercise physiology and science. And the more I was around great coaches and exposed to the science, the more I was just like, there's physiology is way too complex to say there's one right answer for any of this stuff, and everyone's different and everyone's unique. And it's probably more just about being kind of consistent, doing a lot of the good stuff right, like eating well, sleeping well, and training most days, doing some kind of activity. And 99% of the time you'll be there. If anyone thinks that one specific diet or one specific training modality is the secret to all of this, then I definitely don't think they understand how complex physiology is, and it's more just about doing the big things. I know that's it's probably bad for business and bad for myself, but it kind of the most important thing is just train well, train pretty often, and eat well and sleep well, and that's a lot more simpler than a lot of the influencers would like to say.
Yeah, but it's so true. I mean, like, as someone, I've been running since 1996 with a little break in between, but like, the things I've learned when I started versus now, and like what I try and always teach my athletes is like, it's not this, there's not the internet didn't exist back in my day the way it does now in 1996. So I didn't have this like thing in my face telling me I'm doing everything wrong and here's the right way. But like, it's not that complicated. And everyone tries to make, the more complicated social media can make something, or someone wants
Yeah,
to, the more you feel like you need them. Right. And so people
because then
purposely
it
do that.
makes them feel like an authority figure. I get sent so many funny videos on Instagram from accounts that are just like, hey, what do you think about this? Like, I ran a marathon on a carnivore diet and I ran fast. It's like, yeah, like you can only eat steak and still run. Like, there's no rules that say you can't do that. It's probably not the best way to do it, but just because one person did it doesn't mean it's the right answer.
Yeah. Um,
Concerning.
Cool.
Yeah.
I know it's so much. It's hard. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So why don't we dive into the topic a little bit? So, I'll give our audience a little bit of like what we're thinking and then we'll hop into it. But so this topic, what we think is really interesting is because what we find today is science is rapidly changing, right? And so things are happening much faster than years ago. and we're learning so much. But as coaches, it's so important to, while as coaching, it's always so important to be learning, but not immediately running with science every time something comes out to your athletes, right? Like it's like that balance, and like that's where social media, and we'll talk about it a little bit, kind of runs with stuff so fast. But like, as a coach, like you said, consistency, sleep, eating, like do those things before we jump on some trend that just came out, right? And so, I like to, for people, I want to do this. So a definition I like when it comes to science is the pursuit and application of knowledge and understanding of the natural and social world following a systematic method based on evidence, right? And so I kind of want to do that because as we dive into like all this and what drives science and what we're looking to do, like I wanted people to understand like this is this world of science, and it Jonah does such a great job of presenting it, but also not like, I don't want it to be, we're going to dive into all that. But so, I think for our first question, Jonah, I want to talk a little bit about like scientific studies in general, and so how they're usually done, how we get data from them, and like some of their limitations.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'll try to make it very simple. So, what we do typically, like my background in scientific research, is we typically get a group of people together and we have a research question. For example, do carbs improve your performance? And that's very general. They're typically much more specific to that. And then we design an intervention or some kind of research that we think is going to answer that question. The thing with research when we look at the lab setting is our goal is to be as valid as possible. And so what that means is we try to control for a lot of other variables where we say, this is exactly what we're going to do. We're going to know exactly who you are as a human, everything else you're going to do outside of the lab. We're going to control for all these other things, like limit other foods you eat, for example, or your training, just to make sure we answer that one specific question, because our goal at the end is to provide answers to that one specific question. And that can be very valuable in that setting where we're trying to find a specific answer. But the issue is sometimes when we go out into the real world and we actually run a marathon, we're not going to be able to control for all those factors. So taking some of the data that we get from a small study and put it into the real world often struggles because there's all these other factors in the real world that we can't control for. And sometimes those specific answers we get in a lab don't transfer over well. And the other issue is historically with science, with a lot of the literature we're looking at now, is it's very small sample sizes on typically white college males, because that's who you study at universities. And we know that humans are very complex and who you are as an individual can change. So it's hard to apply a lot of these findings that we have historically to the general population because a lot of us are white college males in general as well too. And so making sure that we can apply some of these generalities is tough. And so science is getting much better where we're getting larger sample sizes. The more people you recruit, the better it's going to be to apply those findings to other individuals. And we're also getting better at diversifying the research. So we're studying more females, different ethnicities. And that's really important to help make sure that the findings we had historically apply to everyone. So the historical science is really good at answering very specific questions for a very specific group of people. But the issue is in the real world, applying that stuff can be beneficial where, okay, we have enough research now where we know that in taking carbohydrates during a marathon from a lot of different papers is going to improve your performance. But some of the other questions we're trying to answer just doesn't do a great job because it's too specific for a very specific group of people, where in the real world it just doesn't do as well. And so I
Yeah.
think the best coaches I've worked with take some of those findings from the research and then also their own experience working in the applied field and apply those is what I'll say.
Yeah, and are willing to like adapt, right? I think that's the big thing about coaching, right? Because like I started running in marathons in 2011, and the research about gels, and there was one gel really you could take, and it was goo, and I didn't like it. And now it's like, okay, well, there's so much research out there. You're basically ignoring it if you're not following it, like purposefully ignoring it.
And you brought up a great point. I think when you're looking at research and you're trying to be a research back coach, when a new random paper comes out that's like on 10 people, it's good to take note of it, but not apply it right away. But in science, what we like to do is when we have several studies that all give us the same answer or point in the same direction across multiple groups, then we know that that recommendation is a lot more powerful. So when people do things like meta-analysis or we look at several papers together, in science, if we apply a finding, we want to make sure there's several papers pointing towards the same thing because that gives us more confidence in the answer.
I think what you do a really great job of, and I low key notice these things, but I know it's intentional from you, is people will be presenting what they do in your comment section on a given post, right? And they may actually come from a place that is not with malintent, but they're coming across a little hot. They're like, well, I don't X, Y, and Z, and I've been a runner, somebody who strength trains for X amount of years, and this is what qualifies me, right? And you have this way, and I communicate the same way too when I'm working with people in real life. You ask them, right? What do you do? And you meet them where they're at, which I think is really important for coaches to take away from when they do see something that either you post, Jonah, or a paper comes across their desk for whatever reason. You need to meet the individual where they're at currently and
Yeah.
recognize that, like, somebody who's never fueled a marathon or whatever in their life, like, you need to be taking in 60 to 90 grams tomorrow, Miriam. No, it's like you
I think
really,
that, yeah. No,
yeah.
that's such a good point, Amanda, where when you are working with an individual one-on-one, I think I've been fortunate enough to work alongside great coaches where early on I would have made that same mistake. But now I realize too how much of this is behavioral psychology and understand that if I just say to someone who has never done anything before, like you alluded to, I've never fueled a marathon before. If I go out and tell them to start taking 5 gels an hour the next day, that's not going to go well. And there's a behavioral psychology element because they're not going to believe you. And they're also just not haven't practiced that, so it's not going to go well too. So I completely agree. I think it's combining the coaching with the science to say, hey, this is a human being in front of me who probably doesn't like change. So if I go out and make them change everything about the routine, that's going to cause more harm than good. How do we get them small wins over time?
Yeah, that's such a great point, and I really think it leads into our next question really well. What I want to talk about is like, so I think back to like super shoes back in 2018, or bicarb, which is like a big thing right now, or ketones, right? And all these things that bust on the scene, with a lot of science behind them, in differing levels, right? In the beginning is science that just pops out, and then like you talked about how we do studies, more and more science comes out. But with the science behind them, people are also willing to push to the unknown, right? There's a lot of, watch the Tour de France and what they're doing. Like, they're always pushing, and sometimes people are like, let me replicate that. And it's like, maybe don't right away. But like, I think one of the things to everything we are just talking about is, so how should we take these studies, start applying it to our sport to educate people on things that maybe new, or experienced runners, but also, caution people that we're still figuring out science. Like, ketones really, in my mind, rushed out there real fast. They had great marketing, and then people are trying to wonder out, how do I use this thing, right? This kind of stuff happens real fast. And so I think it's interesting how we help the general population understand kind of these
Yeah,
new things.
I think it's a great point. I think when people hear science in a general population term, they think that's synonymous with truth, and they don't understand that that's not the case, right? Exactly as you alluded to, like ketones are probably at now in the research where we were on carbs 20 years ago for in-race performance benefits, and understanding that science moves slowly, and that a lot of times we figure out stuff we said earlier was wrong, where it's about probabilities in science. It's like we think this may be true, but take it all with a grain of salt. So what I would say is to answer the question, and correct me, I might be misinterpreting it, but I would say the term I like to use is a science guided coach, or a coach I really respect once told it to me. It's like I hold like the science in loose terms, like loosely based science coach. And essentially what that means is we understand what the science is saying, and we have like general principles based on science. And for example, for like running, that would probably be like consistency, running most days, periodization, like general specific, fueling, having carbs. But we also know that the individual in front of us is an individual human being, and they're going to respond differently and on an individual level. So I'm guided by scientific principles, but then I also understand that the human in front of me may adapt differently based on who they are. And so then I may have to just adjust the plan and also understand that on the individual level, like notice patterns within the individual. Some things work and some things don't work. So I think I would say try to understand the science and be led by it, but not be so stuck in it where it's like, okay, if this one principle isn't working for that individual, let me adjust a little bit.
Yeah, and sort of also alluding to on that topic, like, as new things come out, like, how do we protect the general population, whether it's as a coach or just a sports scientist or just a research
Yeah,
account, right?
it's a great point, right? Because I think a lot of times people don't realize that as we brought up earlier, it's like who you do the research on, that matters. Like if I do a research paper that comes out about the Tour de France cyclist taking 120 grams of carbs per hour, you have to understand that Tour de France cyclist physiology is very different from your physiology, from most physiology. They've accumulated physiological adaptations that probably allow them to use a lot of carbs per hour. They burn a lot of energy in the day, and that isn't going to apply to everyone. So take everything with a grain of salt where, hey, if a study was done on a professional athlete and you don't work with a professional athlete, then maybe it doesn't apply to your population. Or vice versa, if you work with professional athletes and this was a study about fasting for improving metabolic health in obese individuals, it probably doesn't apply to your population. And I see that a lot now too, as we get this mix of like longevity research being very hot with like performance research. Like I people say to me all the time, but the longevity researchers are telling me to like only eat in this window. And it's like, yeah, but you're running 3 hours a day. So that's not going to work for you. So it's about understanding who the research is done on, what that population demand is, and if that's the population you work with or if it applies to you.
There's also a huge, you were talking about it earlier, a lot of the research that is shared is not only does it lack nuance, but there's a lot of privilege
Mm,
behind it. So you see a lot of, I mean, on this, and Jonah, we spoke about this offline, we name names here. So there are a lot of these big platforms like Huberman and Mel Robbins. I don't know. I'm just naming random. Even you get where I'm going here.
yeah, yeah.
And they'll even Atia and okay, we'll save the rest for the Patreon. I find that they release this information and it gets into the hands of people who are critical thinkers. However, they're not critically thinking about their individualized, their experience, whatever their lived experience, being a parent, being a woman, being a person of color, being somebody with critical chronic illness, an autoimmune disease, like being a runner, be applying strength training, like all these things. So, staring at the sun, it's like, I can't stare at the sun. I have to sleep during the day because I'm a nurse in an emergency room. So we get these questions as coaches, and it's just, and I think that kind of leading to our next question, how things kind of spread like rapidly, like fire. So how social media and everyone now having a voice, and a lot of the people I just mentioned, like they may be experts in purchasing podcast equipment, but they're not two knees deep in the science like you are, and they don't work with general population like Nick and I do, and you. So what are I think one of the things that we've noticed on social media are when influencers were running wild with zone 2 and this obsession that like no one really understood what it was at a certain point, and how it was actually helping them, but they were fixated on this zone 2. So that's just, I guess, an example of something we've seen recently, but I'm sure there are hundreds of more.
Yeah, I think it's a great example. And I mean, I don't know how much I can add to exactly your point, which I thought was excellent. And essentially what you said is understand that when someone gives these topics or these points, like it's for a mass general population, but that doesn't mean it applies specifically to you. Your context, like context and coaching, is everything. Like, what are your daily life demands? Like, what are your limitations? What are your constraints? And you may have different constraints that are going to make some of that information not apply well to you. Like, the common one now is like glucose monitors. It's like glucose monitors do really well for people with diabetes, but honestly, I don't think there's a ton of use cases for them outside of it. So, if you're a type 1 diabetic, like a CGM makes a lot of sense. But if you're not a type 1 diabetic and you listen to a podcast about CGMs really helping them, it probably doesn't apply to you unless you have specific metabolic constraints. So that's just like an example too, where it's like, hey, who was this podcast probably targeted at or this information? And does it actually apply to me based on my underlying constraints? And yeah, I think people right now, like you said with the zone 2 and stuff, they like buzzwords, they like the biohacking. But at the end of the day, like zone 2, for example, zone 2 just allows you to stay consistent because it doesn't put a lot of stress on your body and allows you to accumulate a lot of miles and volume, which is probably good in certain circumstances if you have the time for that. And there's no like special physiological adaptations that happen there. Like Your body doesn't know if you cross some certain threshold. It doesn't know that. But what happens is it just doesn't cause a lot of fatigue, and that allows you to be consistent. So it's about understanding like the underlying principles rather than just like the fancy buzzwords, and also taking into account like who am I, what are my constraints, and does this actually apply to me? So just digging a little deeper, I would say.
Yeah, and right on that line, like, so this is like my fear of this whole idea is right. So like zone two became this like incredible buzzword, and like for a lot of us running, we knew what it was, and like I think what social media does, unfortunately, is zone two was obviously beneficial for runners. We want to convince them to do it. Social media help rapidly expediates this idea, pushes it out so much that we swing so far in the other direction that now people are posting their runs and like, I was 100% of my run in zone two. I nailed it. It's like, no, like now we go to the other extreme because like we're an extremist society. And it's always like, okay, well, if zone two is the way to get faster, I have to do all my runs in zone two. No, like we need speed to fast days and other days. And like your easy day could actually go in zone three for a couple minutes and it's not the end of the world. But
Yeah.
like we just, because this is like getting so, there is science and then we're like influence everything on social media is like pushing it so far that it feels like now people think, well, okay, well, I have like this other extreme of this thing and they're failing if they don't follow it to a T.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing where it's important that we understand that, like we talked about earlier, this is so complex, like your body's not going to know the difference properly, and it doesn't matter. Like the main principles are just like staying consistent over time.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I think like along those lines. And I think, I think it's just one of the things we talk about a lot on here is just what it really matters, what is going to overdo it for you, and at the same time, like what can we drop? Like what can we live without? Right? What's not going to make a difference? So yeah, I think this was just this point. I think zone two was just like this thing on my feed for so long that I kind of just thought it would be interesting to talk about because there is science to it, so it makes sense. So when you question people, they're like, "Oh no, well, the science says I should do it," and they're right, but not to the extreme we take it.
Yeah, and I think like you brought up an excellent point. The zone two is a really good example. It's like, yeah, like you should do zone two, but you should do the other days as well. And I think it's about understanding the underlying principles of zone two and like what it does versus what it doesn't do. And that really allows you to understand the importance of it. Like the main reason zone two adds a lot of benefit is like as people are saying, they're correct, is it comes with a very small fatigue cost, so it's easy on your body and still allows you to get some stimulus. And we know now that like training volume or being able to do a lot of running, if your goal is to run as fast as you possibly can in a marathon, if you're an elite runner, there's a reason they're all running this much. Like it may not be healthy, but it is going to make them faster. And you can't run every day 100 miles per week at a marathon pace or faster. Go out and try it. You'll blow up. It's
Mhm.
inevitable. But the zone two does allow you to run a lot, and it allows you to probably reduce your injury risk and run a lot without doing a ton of fatigue. So then when you do need to run at your marathon pace or faster, you can do it. And that's like the main benefit of zone two, right? It's allows you to run more without the fatigue cost of some of the higher intensities, and that increase in running volume probably will help you. So it's about just like understanding those underlying principles. But if your goal is just like overall health and longevity, I actually don't know. Like if I have 3 hours in a week to train, or like let's say I have an hour and a half a week to train, I probably would do most of it at intensity because that's a bigger stimulus. And I actually think if your goal is just overall health and longevity, that bigger stimulus is going to create better health adaptations than just riding a bike easy for an hour and a half throughout a whole entire week.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. That's exactly the intense session. I had this conversation recently with somebody who started working with me and we spoke about how what their plan would look like. And I'm like, we're going to prioritize strength training for these two of the
Exactly.
three sessions during the week. And then this session will focus on plyometrics and a little intensity, right? So it's just it is, again, like we were saying earlier, it's meeting people where they're at and taking those things into account versus seeing something that is flashy on social media and then just applying it to yourself willy-nilly.
And
Yes.
okay, half an hour a week, they're probably gonna have better fitness gains because it's more stress on a human system and your body doesn't know the difference. Your body's just trying to evolve to survive. So if it's exposed to more stress and it can recover, it's gonna get better adaptations that are gonna make you faster. It's just you can't do that like for 20 hours a week or you would blow up. But all things created equal, more intensity at the same volume is going to probably lead to better adaptations if you don't get hurt and you can recover. And like, I don't think intensity is a bad thing. Like, I think if you have a very small amount of time to work out in a week, I would do intensity.
Yeah, I think that the issue comes with the
People who
fact
have
that
like,
most
yeah, people, if you've
right,
never
they do everything. They have no
choose like people have never worked out before and then they go split up pills. I'm like, no, that's not what I'm saying. Like, when I work with someone who has like a good background in exercise and we've progressed them to a certain point and they're like, I have a very busy life schedule right now, but I still want some adaptations. Let's just like do bike for half an hour hard session. It's like low impact bike session. We'll
yep,
use that, for example.
But
yep.
but then it's like I also find that people undersell what intensity is, right? So then people will go do their 20-mile long run in marathon block and they'll run the whole thing at marathon pace and they'll be like, "Oh, it's just an easy long run." Because it's, and I'm like, "That was like the most intense run of your week probably." Like you're missing the bubble here
It's
because of
intensity,
course
it's low volume
yeah. And
intensity.
it's like they miss it and they undersell intensity. Like, well, that's not intensity is my speed day. It's my workout day where I'm running like speed pace. I'm like, no, that much work in your long run is intensity. It's just not doesn't feel that way because it's marathon pace. So like
Exactly.
that's where people get lost in the marathon. That's where they always get hurt. It's just like,
Exactly. That's load. Like volume plus intensity is the training load.
yeah. On this topic a little bit, like, do you find as we're talking scientific advice and we're doing it on social media that, I mean, we joke here a lot, like some of the things we always see is like, do these 3 things to fix your knee pain forever or to PR in your race. Like, do you find that you have to tailor how you give your information so it like goes on social media, or you just do it the way you want to and you're just
Something that I've really had to find the balance with, where at first, when I first started, this is something I've changed out with social media. I was just like, I'm not going to do any of the hooks. I'm not going to do any of that
Yeah,
BS because
I've
I'm going to,
noticed this evolution of you, Jonah.
yeah, stay to the science. But then I'm just like, okay, this is hitting 3 to 5 people tops.
Right,
And then I
right.
get people who are like totally selling out, selling total bullshit. Sorry for the language, where it's just like this one exercise will fix your knee. And it's like, okay, that's like the worst thing ever. And it's like, that's just not true at all. So I'm like, okay, I started understanding like human psychology, hooks. I'm just like, if you do want to have an impact, you do want to reach a large amount of people. So now I'm in this part where I'm just like, how do I find a hook that's going to create curiosity, that's going to like promise some benefit, but then also show the rationale, the science behind it? And then I always do try to end with like, hey, there's no right answers. This may help you, this may not. Or if you are in pain, go see a physical therapist. Like, this might not fix your knee pain, and that's not how physiology works. So I try to find that balance where it's like create curiosity, create a hook, some promise to them, so you do reach a large audience, but then also rationalize it with science and also say it's probably a little more complex than that. So you have the hook, but then later on you do say like, hey, it's a little more complex than just this one right answer.
yeah.
You got to get them in the door somehow. And
You
those who
got,
are,
you got to play the game a little
you
bit. I
got to
realize.
play the game. That's exactly, look, I've noticed, I remember because we've been friends for a while on social media. And I remember, I mean, your following has grown tremendously and it's because of the amazing work you do. And it's because you're like,
Well, it's
got to
the hook.
change this marketing strategy. Okay.
The hooks. I'm just like, if I start off with like mitochondria PC1A alpha, that's not going to do it for most
You're
people.
gonna lost in the marinara sauce. They're
Yeah.
gone. They're
Well, we're
gone
definitely
before.
Most people do just want to know the one exercise that fixes their knee pain.
They really do.
Unfortunately,
And you can't blame them for
no,
that.
you
You can't.
can't. No, it's human. Unfortunately, that one exercise doesn't exist. But
Right.
and why? I wish some days my knee hurts, and I'm like, man, I wish there was one exercise that fixes this, but it doesn't.
Yeah, there's sometimes I watch one of your videos and I was like, oh no, Jonah sold out to the influencers.
Yeah,
And then
the
I
hook.
watched the whole thing and I'm like, oh no, he's the same. He's just getting us in.
Yeah, I get my hook where I'm just like, this is how I improved my marathon time by 20 minutes, and it's just like I just ran a lot for 2 years straight.
All right. I ran a lot.
My
I
secret
ate
berries
enough.
from
I slept and I ate enough for 2 years straight. It's not actually a hook. It's not actually a hack.
Right.
yeah.
It's the same message I've
Yeah.
literally been telling you every day, but
It's
I
just
just
now
use a
my
different.
first time is saying this is what I did to run 20 minutes faster. People are like,
And
oh
then you
wow,
drop at the end the secret berries that you're partnered
yeah.
with that
The
fix
ketone,
everything.
buy the ketone shot.
So, um, give us, if you don't mind, a little sneak peek at some of the latest, or maybe not latest, but just, the science you're excited about, and what do you think will be game changing in the coming months
Man,
or
I don't
years?
I don't know if there's going to be a ton. I mean, I do think the big thing that you will see more and more. I mean, listen, it's all going to come back to training well, sleep, nutrition, consistency. But I do think the thing that is we are going to see come up more and more is like AI, wearables, and data analysis. Like, let's be honest, everyone's wearing smartwatches now. Who's a runner? Ones like a lot of people wearing heart rate monitors, a lot of people getting new technology, and these companies are connecting more and more data. And I've been talking to a lot of them now too, who are incorporating artificial intelligence as that gains in popularity and it gets better. And it's very similar to what I was doing at the end of the day in the NFL, where I've been talking to some of these companies now with the watches and everything, and some of the insights they're getting is actually really impressive to me. Where I do think in a few years we will see a lot of coaching where it's the way it's going to look is we'll have AI coaching that's powered with a coach. So essentially, like the AI systems, the watches, the Garmin, or different app platforms will analyze all your historical training data. They'll give that report to a coach, and the coach will help work with that platform to design and plan. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think I'm biased towards that, but I do think it will help the coach be more creative. The coach will always have the final say. So I do think we are going to be entering a world soon, especially in running, nutrition, where there is a lot of artificial intelligence happening, where it's like making suggestions, adjusting your plan, even in just like day to day apps, wearables, nutrition. I do think people are just going to become more open to it as it becomes more and more of our day to day life. Nick, you may have some thoughts of that too with your background as well, but I just think the more I see these systems evolve, the more I talk to the companies, it's just like inevitable it's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's like as coaching virtual people too, like it helps to have more
It helps.
information, right? Like I know you've done lactate tests where you like, you prick and get the blood level, and then you can like with
Yeah.
that with someone you can literally get their lactate level. You can tell them when to stop their workout instantly. But what if through AI, through all this
Yeah. Like all the
technology exists?
training data, like you could predict marathon times pretty well now. And like I can tell if you're getting better or not. And I just think that's going to continue.
Yeah, it's just like, but the model has to change because, like, I don't know if Garmin does this on purpose, but it's like so abusive and it's like you're not productive. It doesn't know, and it's just like funny at this point. But like, if people want to trust AI, it can't. It can tell you something's wrong, but like, it can't just be like you're unproductive for no reason whatsoever.
That's what I think. I think the systems are going to get better at actually like as they collect more data, as they understand the difference in front of you, like collecting more individualized responses in those situations. And I think that will help. And I think it will help coaching as well, as you're saying.
Yeah, I also think like shoe technology is like a wild area for me too because like so I coach athletes who like who qualify for Olympic
Yeah.
trials and things like that. But it's this like wild world now where shoe technology is getting out of control while they're putting limitations on professional athletes and races of like, oh, well, this is the stack height. But like Puma doesn't care. They're building like a pogo stick shoe. Regular runners are allowed to wear these things in a race because a race isn't going to ban like we're not in a world anytime soon a race is going to ban a shoe because of stack
Yeah.
height or springs, but like it's going to be an advantage for people who can wear these insane shoes that are coming out versus people who can't.
And I think the huge area of opportunity, Nick, and both of you, I'm curious your opinion on this. I think there's going to be a huge opportunity for education. I've seen now with shoes and carbs, especially, where like it's coming into the limelight more and more. Like I get so many DMs about like, oh, I probably should be taking more carbs to my marathon. Like I didn't realize this. And a lot of it's about education, where there's just so much confusion about when do I need fuel for like what type of runs versus what do I not like when do I take them in my marathon. And I think now we're seeing more and more information come out about the importance of it, but people haven't been doing it. So I think there's going to be a huge opportunity where we'll see education. People will get better at fueling, and people will get better at like, or we'll have the opportunity to educate back. This is when you do use these shoes. This is when you're not. This is how you rotate. And I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity to educate as that stuff as it just becomes more readily available. Like everyone has access to gels now. Like they're everywhere. Like super shoes are everywhere now. So there's going to be a huge opportunity to educate about, hey, this is when you do use this. This is when you're not. Like if you're a metabolically unhealthy person and you're running like 3 miles a week, like you don't need to be using gels. Like people get mad at me when I say that, but it's just like it's just true, right? It's like you have to understand the demands in front of you. And so that's where I feel like you alluded to before, it's like we live in areas of extremes and it's like how do we educate to find that middle ground of like you're not a professional athlete or you are or you're just getting into running, this is the best solution for you.
There is an absolute area of education. A lot of, as you know, my page is really, I talk a lot about fueling from the lens of somebody who had not only had multiple eating disorders, but a huge part of my roster of runners and my personal training clients are folks who have an eating disorder past or have a shitty relationship with food weight in their body. So in a sport like running and endurance in general, I think that it's education and it's also peeling back the resistance
Yeah.
of the fueling for your body and the activity you're engaging in. And I think that this is an area that, in my opinion, continues to be one that I'll die educating on this. And it's because we have people with it's for many reasons, but one of them is that we have people with major platforms who share a lot of their personal experience, and their personal experience happens to really be lacking in the foundational things that we're talking about. So like they're selling colostrum or a green powder, but like they're taking one gel during their 1 hour 40-minute long half marathon. That's not helpful to the community. So
Exactly. No, I agree.
so I totally agree with you.
Like your demographic too, like I've worked with so many of them now too, who I'm just like, they'll get the videos, so it's like, well, I'm not fueling enough, I'm not taking Joe's because I watch this influencer who's like, I'm like, well,
Right.
no, that's not you. You're running 60 or 70 miles a week.
Yeah.
You're probably at an unhealthy body weight to the point where you're too lean, and that's not actually metabolically healthy. So it's like you have to understand, like, you need to fuel more, and that's the context in front of you. Like, your main source of information shouldn't be Huberman, shouldn't be that area, because it's not who you are. Like, I understand like the physiological demands of you as an individual, and that's why I feel like what you brought up is very important. Like, how do we individualize education for the person in front of us? Because so many of these people have different needs, like different goals, and like we see like the big podcast or the big sources like give one information for everyone, and that's just not true. Like if you're an endurance athlete, like that's like most endurance athletes who are serious about running are under fueling, if I'll be honest.
Yes.
So that's what
Yes.
like are at unhealthy body weights to the point where it's too low. To this
Yeah.
point. And they don't realize that getting to a healthier body weight is actually going to help their training because they're going to feel better, they're going to run faster, and that's going to lead to better adaptations.
Oh, there was a period where I said this on this podcast, where I was like in elite fields very often, and at the start line of big races near the front, and I'd look around, I'd be 25 pounds heavier than everyone, and all I'd question is like, why am I here? Like, am I fueling my body right? Like, what am I doing wrong? These people have like 8 more abs than I have. Like, and it just like it would mess with you. But like as I got started run, like it took me to run faster times to like believe it, but I wish it would have just believed it in the beginning instead of like thinking something was wrong with how I was fueling.
Yeah.
But like, I could never get to that way. I would have never been to the same weight and size as them, and they were all my height, if I didn't like really limit myself
Yeah,
so
and it's
much.
genetics. And the more I've worked with some of those individuals, I will say the ones who recently I found have been responding to best to training are actually fueling a lot. And they just have huge energetic demands. And that's okay, but they're taking in a ton of calories, they're taking a ton of fuel, and they're seeing really good, as I've worked with more and more of them, really, really good adaptations, that they feel better, they feel really good. And like the race times are going up, which is probably what
Yeah, they really are. And so, I think that sums up all this. And this is the last topic I think that's interesting is like, you said it earlier, but I wrote down scientifically aware but experience based coaching model. Like understanding science but like using experience, right? And so,
exactly.
I think what we're trying to summarize from all this is like how as coaches, just lovers of the sport of running, like how we take all this science information that you're getting and how we learn it, how we're aware of it and apply it, but also keep our finger on the pulse as it grows, because things have, in the beginning, super shoes seemed like, oh, it's just a fad. And then now every single person runs
Yeah,
a race in a super shoe. Like bicarb, I'm pretty sure is going to be another big thing that a lot of people are sitting there right before their race eating a little
yeah.
Morton bicarb solution.
My for this, it's always the test of time. Like if
Yeah.
like carbs are still here for a reason. People aren't gonna like that answer, but it's like
It's the truth.
give it a few years. If something's still here, then it's like probably good. Or if more and more papers come out, my thing is just don't overreact to one paper or one product. Like bicarb, I'm still not sold on for the like. I think bicarb, yeah, will be here, but I think like give it time, right? And that's
Yeah.
what
I would
Okay.
have to prolong my early retirement if I decided to get on the bicarb train. Like the price is too damn
So
high for me to
expensive.
just eat
That's the other part.
Oh,
Yeah.
some
it's
more Pop Tarts.
We're taking out like super shoes work like to an extent, right? Based on the individual, but like they're standing the test of time. So that's what I would say. It's just like if you see something is sticking around and you're seeing multiple sources of papers or information pointing towards it, then I would start experimenting with it. But don't go 0 to 100, as we alluded to earlier. Just experiment with it and see how your athletes respond.
Yeah, and as coaches, just be aware. Your athletes are going to ask you because they're going to now the information's more available.
Yeah,
They're seeing it every day. Someone talk about some new thing that made them the fastest runner ever, and I see it all the time. People are very much more inclined to listen to influencers than professional athletes or
yeah,
other people. They're very so. It's as a coach, it's just kind of being aware and be like, all right, I know the science on this too. We shouldn't really apply it yet, or like we can try it in training,
that's
but
my big
like
thing. Like if anytime I have an athlete wants to try something, like I always kind of let them try it if I think it's not gonna really hurt them. But my thing was always graded exposure, right? And that's what I would say to all the coaches out there. It's like you don't want an athlete running in never super shoes to running in super shoes every day. That's not going to be good. Or like never having whatever, like a certain supplement to taking it every day. So just help them with graded exposure to see how they react.
love that.
Same,
Awesome.
same.
Amanda, should we do our secret guest questions? Sum it
Jonah,
up.
you have time for the secret.
I got a
Secret.
few minutes.
Yeah. All right. Let's hit them.
Don't try to take those minutes away from us, Jonah.
All right, Jonah. Question the first. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
That's tough. I just think honestly, like the more I've been around like the best coaches and everyone, they're all just like very much just like take everything with a grain of salt. Like just like question things. Don't seek in absolutes.
Yeah, that's great. Only cis deal in absolutes anyway.
Yep.
Question the second. What's one thing that people are generally surprised to find out about you?
Oh, man, I don't know. That's tough.
Jonah hates running.
Yeah, I hate running. Oh, I don't generally surprised to find out about me. Yeah, I mean, most people. I didn't really run for the first like 25 years of my life, 26 years.
Same.
So there's that. I was just thrown into an exercise physiology lab at University of Texas where all they studied was running. I was just like, fuck, I might as well do this thing a little.
Great. All right. Question the third. What's something you wish more people understood about your industry?
Wow, don't follow influencer extremism.
That's ain't that the truth. That's one of the themes of this episode.
Yeah.
This was so fun. Jonah, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Why don't you let everyone know where they can find you? And are you somebody who do you take clients? What kind of clients do you
Yeah.
take? Where
So
are you? Talk to us.
yeah, the best way is to find me on Instagram at Rosner Performance, and then my newsletter is definitely like the biggest one where I share everything, and that's Marathon Science. And I'll send you all the links so you can link it. That's in my Instagram bio too. Rosner Performance and Marathon Science. In regards to what I do offer, I don't offer one-on-one coaching at the moment, but we're about to launch a few different things. Well, we're launching individualized strength plans, individualized running plans based on critical speed modeling with a few other coaches. And that uses artificial intelligence to design the strength plans. And based on initial questionnaire, we scrape your historical training data for the strength plans, running plans, and then we're launching our 16-week training communities leading up to the fall marathon. So it's a 16-week community where we've built an application. Each week is a different theme where we educate you. Strength for runners, nutrition for runners. We have guest speakers, some of the biggest PhDs in the name, like Louise Berg, like Nike Breaking 2 scientists are contributing to that. You got all your training through there, all your nutrition education. There's a place for you to talk, share your training, share it all with your watches. Those two 16-week cohorts, there's one for everyone, and then there's a female specific one. And we're working with a university where we're analyzing all your female specific data after to anonymize it to create some novel insights, which should be pretty cool. We're giving them all the females DEXA scans for bone mineral density, blood works included.
Oh my God, it's like
So that should be a core initiative that's going to be leading up to the New York City Marathon. So that's just like a
I'm
track meet.
coming.
So hopefully we do some practical. That's limited to 100 females who are in the process of selecting with the universities we're working with. So hopefully it should be pretty cool.
Okay. No, that. Oh my
That's awesome
gosh!
stuff.
Everything that you just my
we're
bad
gonna
bitch bones
do
just were singing.
strength training. We're gonna make them do plyos and hopefully like supplements and everything for those bones in general. Just to show them, with the goal is also to show like, hey, when you fuel and train well, look what happens from like bones and all this healthy stuff. So hopefully that does well. So that's exciting.
I co-sign that. Me and
Yep.
my bad bitch bones co-sign it. Thank
There
you.
you
That
go.
was great. That was great. Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
we'll link what we have.
Yeah, I'll send you guys that. Thank you so much for having me. Like I said, you guys are doing the good stuff.
Thank you.
you. Thank you. Thank you for being here. And thank you, everyone, for watching and listening and all the things. You can reach out to Nick and I at any time via our individual Instagrams or at between2coaches@gmail.com. If you loved this episode, share it with a friend or an enemy. Maybe they need it.
There you go.
And we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.